Hello, I'm Catherine O'Fallon, the Executive Director of the Marine Research Hub, leading efforts to advance ocean solutions and innovation in Florida and beyond. By 2030, the global ocean economy is projected to reach $3 trillion and 40 million jobs. And Florida, surrounded by water, is uniquely positioned to lead the way with marine solutions with a global impact. At the Marine Research Hub, we connect stakeholders, elevate oceanographic research, and commercialize marketable solutions that drive investment opportunities, create sustainable jobs, and ultimately protect our marine and coastal environments. Founded in 2017, the Marine Research Hub bridges the gap between scientific discovery and real-world application. Through collaboration between researchers, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and industry leaders, we accelerate commercialization, investment, and ecosystem building, creating lasting impact for our oceans and coastal communities. We are just beginning to make waves, and the potential is limitless. Join us as we fuel the blue economy through innovation, sustainability, and strategic investment, from Florida to the entire world. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Blue Economy Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine O'Fallon, the Executive Director with the Marine Research Hub. I'm really excited to be starting 2026 with one of my favorite people. I've admired her for a long time. I get the privilege to work with her. Dr. Jennifer Jurado is the Chief Resilience Officer with Broward County. For those of you who are watching around the world with us and you don't know where Broward County is, we're in South Florida, or if you're new to the channel, we're based in South Florida. Our office here and we're sitting in Dr. Jurado's office in Fort Lauderdale. So as we're talking about the county, Broward County, just to give you an idea of where we're at, we're in South Florida, which is at the heart of a lot of the blue economy resiliency. And that's why we're really excited to have her joining us today. I'm so glad that we were able to fit into your schedule and sit down with you. And so I've met you, we've met. I always like to kind of think back to when I first met you. And I think I'll tell you the first time I met you that I can recall was at Ocean Exchange, actually, which was so weird because that was even before I stepped into this role. You were, Chief Resilience Officer, or maybe it was a different title at the time a few years ago. But we sat down at a table at Ocean Exchange, which, as for some of you guys who might be watched us before, we support Ocean Exchange and accelerating blue economy solutions. And I was just like blown away by just everything you were doing with Broward County. We didn't have a long time to talk, but then as I've stepped into this role with Marine Research Hub, we've had a lot more time to work together. And so thank you for taking the time to sit down, because I think one of the reasons we really wanted to have this conversation is to kind of show everyone the different people and different players and relationships that are really important to the Marine Research Hub and to building the blue economy in South Florida. And the county and the municipalities are such an important part of this. And so first, I want to kind of talk about your history of how you got here, what your background is, before we dive into some of the other details. So
Sure.
Where'd you go? I know where you went to school, but tell everyone else, grow up here. How did you get into this space?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to participate today. And you have an incredible memory to reflect back so many years. I remember the first Ocean Exchange. That was a great opportunity, exposure to all the innovation that's taking place in the space. So no, I am not a local, although after 30 some years, it's about as close as you can get. But I'm originally from Idaho. I actually didn't see the ocean for the first time until maybe I was 14 or so years old, and was just in awe, thinking, oh my gosh, it looks just like National Geographic,
Like everything I imagined on TV.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so I had a couple of exposures as I was going through the university, ultimately changed my major to marine science and biology as an undergraduate. I then went on to study marine biology and fisheries, which is what I got my doctorate in, and was really focused on what happens at the interface of the coastal environment and anthropogenic influences and, water quality considerations for algal blooms, coastal health, nutrient fluxes, our coral reefs. When I wrapped up my graduate studies, I had the great fortune, I would say, to come to work immediately for Broward County as their water resources manager. That was just at the time that the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan was being advanced. We had, great responsibilities in terms of thinking about how do we fit in our urban water management practices to support the success of the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, while recognizing we are this very dense urban environment that's situated or sandwiched between this prized, freshwater wetland, the Everglades, and prized, fragile marine ecosystem and our coral reefs.
Yeah.
And so that was a large part of my early work, was thinking about urban water supply, natural systems needs, drainage and flood protection. Ultimately, that led into our consideration of climate and impacts, and what does that mean in our water management practices. So much of climate considerations are about water.
Yep.
And then the role has just, morphed and grown over time, and now a little over 20 years with Broward County, and it's really been a great career.
Yeah, because over 20 years you were the first Chief Resilience Officer for Broward County, correct?
That's right. Yes.
Like there was never the title before.
No, just kind of grew into
it. And you had a huge part of a lot of collaborations across the South Florida region with the Climate Compact. So the South Florida Regional Climate Compact with Palm Beach, Broward, Miami, Monroe. Talk us through a little bit about how that started. I don't think anyone talks a little bit about like those first conversations. It's like 17 years now?
Yeah, yep. That's going on 18.
We're going on 18 now.
Yeah, that's right. So this was about 2009. There was a lot of promise for real impactful climate or energy legislation at the federal level. Many of the local governments across the U.S. were in D.C. for the purpose of, advocating for clean energy policy. But at the same time, the communities of South Florida, while generally, pretty supportive, also wanted to acknowledge, look, impacts are already underway.
Yeah.
We're already dealing with the consequences. And so our leadership, with staff support, we're kind of walking the halls and having this conversation about all the work and the challenges taking place in our respective communities. And leadership said, you know what? We really need to get our act together. We're all doing this work, but, we're approaching it from different, angles, and we're trying to reconcile all these diverse maps and projections, and we're next door neighbors. We really should be working more closely together. And so we came back home. 3 months later, we held our first regional climate summit, which was this conversation about the challenges that we face together, the opportunities that come with working together, and laying out a strategy for how we would do that more formally moving forward. So it led to a voluntary commitment, that of the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compacts, drafted in 2009, revealed at that summit, that was attended by about 350, was our first audience. And then we have continued to deliver on those commitments, which have been kind of baselining the science so that we're all utilizing the same tools.
Yep.
Coordinating on advocacy, developing a regional action plan, which we have done and updated a number of times now. And we continue to host. One of the commitments was to convene annually with a regional summit. And so that's what we continue to do. So it's been, as you indicated, moving into 18 years of this formal but voluntary commitment across the 4 counties, but also so much more expansive than that.
Well, now, 300 people. How many were at this last summit? Was like,
I think our peak attendance over the years has been a little over 800. So
that's a lot for the region. And it's also, you mentioned it's voluntary. Like, it must be really, most areas have never been successful at doing this. And I feel like South Florida is a model for a lot of others to see how to work together, because water, as we know, and impacts do not stop at county lines, municipality lines. It's going to impact everybody. And so I love the fact that kind of working together, learning from each other, collaborating. I love the panel that you guys do every year. Is kind of like the relationships across the counties is really what has driven this to be as successful as it has been. So I'm going to come back to the Climate Compact in a little bit, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about what you guys have been, Broward County's County's been working on a little bit. And then we're going to lead into some of the innovation stuff that we're trying to push forward. But I think one of the things that has been really impactful from your role and from the county, from your resilience office, is this Resilient Broward plan that you guys came up with. Last year, unveiled it. Can you talk through a little bit about the reason that this plan is so important, and really how do people, can utilize this plan and these three sources of information?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a pleasure.
Huge. I love it.
Yeah. So and I hope you don't mind, but I want to provide just a little bit of background in that.
Please.
We have been pressured by the impacts of rising seas, and we've known for some time that we can't continue to develop in the same way. Our infrastructure is failing under the challenge of saltwater intrusion into our stormwater pipes, overtopping salinity control gates on our canals, and more intense rainfall has been a factor that we're having to contend with. And so we've had a lot of incremental advancements as part of the way that we require infrastructure to be designed as part of our land use considerations, our overall permitting of stormwater management systems. And so, we had updated stormwater management requirements. We'd updated our finished floor elevations for, future flood conditions and levels. We had also implemented standards for seawalls and barriers to tidal overtopping that would occur as a function of the rising seas, trying to keep water out while we plan better for the water that originates in our systems and how we think about our building elevations. And so that's all well and good if you're looking at new infrastructure. But we recognize, look, not all of Broward County is going to be rebuilt overnight. And so what are we going to do for the rest of the landscape? And so that's a real challenge, because we have about 1,800 miles of canals across all of Broward County that are part of a very elaborate drainage and water management system. We receive more than 60 inches of rain a year that we need to be able to manage efficiently. And we don't have a lot of area for water storage.
Right.
We're completely built out. This is a very dense urban environment. And so the next part of our strategy was, how do you organize all the infrastructure needs in order to better store, convey, and discharge water better, recognizing the constraints of all the infrastructure that's already in place? So that's what the plan did. Very complex hydrologic modeling, very advanced models. We downscaled global climate data to support the rainfall analyses. We combined the influences of sea level rise with actually 2 and 3 feet of sea level rise, its influence on the groundwater table, 20% rainfall, intensification of coastal storm surge. And we looked at the whole array of risks and probabilities that are associated with these dynamic scenarios, and then put all of that information into one complex maps that we can use for design, but others were viewers, so that the community could look at the influence of these factors and think about, well, what does it mean for where we sit and what kind of infrastructure needs are required? But we didn't stop there. We actually then went through the design of the water management alternatives and looked at the reductions and flood benefits that come with these combined scenarios, which are culvert improvements, stormwater improvements, pump improvements, groundwater storage, below ground, storage above ground, improved seawalls. And so green infrastructure across the board. And what different strategies do we have? And then we modeled those outputs. And so now we're able to look at a comparison of pre and post adaptation investments. We quantified the costs of all of those improvements. And we also then economized in terms of looking at, how do you value those benefits? How do you translate it to economic returns? And we looked at flood insurance improvements in terms of cost, preservation of property values, avoided damage losses, preservation of tax base, new jobs, preserved jobs. And so we really were able to build what we would call the business case for why it's smart to invest early and in a coordinated manner across the landscape to deliver the flood reduction and economic benefits that we know these investments will produce. So that's what we're working with today, this shared framework. It's viewable online.
Yeah, you can go. So a person can actually like go to their business or their home, put in the address, and basically put in all those different scenarios you talked about. So they could see what it looks like if the sea level is this high. They can see if there's a storm, the 100-year storm that we had, all that modeling to see their location, right?
Exactly correct.
And then also at that same time, they see those economic benefits that if you don't do anything, here's what it would look like and the costs that it could be associated with it. Or if we do put in these different structures, like you said, culverts, seawalls, stormwater management, even like very basic green infrastructure that sometimes people think it has to be this crazy expensive, which a lot of it is expensive when it comes to like stormwater management, but some of it's not very expensive. Some of it can be implemented at different scales. There's different ways that we can implement it, but people can actually see all of this in viewable format. Where can they find it first? I want to ask you that and make sure that we can share that with people to look at. And then I also want to ask you, so where they can find it. And then also, this has never been, have you seen anybody else who's done something as comprehensive as this?
Yeah. So first, the address is resilientbroward.com. You can also view our whole of our information at broward.org/resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Folks should look for the tool, which is the scenario viewer. And that's what will allow them to look at these scenarios, and they can compare scenarios side by side as well. Yeah. And then explore the economics, as you said. There are a lot of viewers that allow you to look at risk, whether it's a NOAA produced tool or Climate Central, and there are others. But ours are based upon local hydrologic models that are also used by FEMA and by our regional water management districts. So these, again, are very robust tools that are incredibly representative of active water management strategies. So that's a uniqueness, as well as not only looking at exposures, but modeling the alternatives and presenting those. So I am not familiar with a community that's produced something equivalent in terms of a coordinated strategy, a viewable strategy, something that's localized to the point of being able to query down to. We have a 50-foot grid cells. That's the scale of our modeling. So you can really look at the very local considerations. And the economic analyses I've heard have not been duplicated anywhere. So I think that a lot of entities locally, domestically, and internationally have been very interested in the approach. And of course, they'll refine it and ideally improve.
And make it, usable for their space. But I think this goes to talking about that global impact of like what the county is doing with the support of the business community, but that others can learn from this. And hopefully the goal would be is that more people would start reaching out to you and be like, what did you guys do? Because I think what the county has done and implemented and put time and money and effort into is something that can be a benefit for so many other communities as well, to help them make their decisions and learn from it.
Yeah, I would like to acknowledge that this was not work that was performed in a vacuum.
Yes, of course. You have a lot of partners.
Yeah, so important to note that we have a forum that we've convened annually for years, our Resilience Roundtable, that involves leadership across the community, including elected and business. So we've been having shared conversations for some time about the challenges and needs. And it was the business community that ultimately stood up and said, look, we'll support a strategy, but you've got to financially, we'll be supportive of the investments that are needed, but you need to have solid economic metrics. And so that really informed our approach, which is why we have in large part the product that we do, because the community requested that approach. And we involved the business community and many others, community stakeholders, foundations, and so forth, in the steering committee that helped to oversee this work. And we were very inclusive of all the 31 municipalities and the consultant communities and all the planners and all the engineers and water managers. So when we produced this final result, it wasn't Broward County that had worked in isolation for 4 years and then came back and said, here's the product. There had been broad and active participation throughout a process. So now it's a shared product. And so we're working very closely with the business community on what are the next steps. Now, how do you move to implementation? But I do want to share too, because you asked the question about the complexity of solutions. And the fact is that these things are largely, they're available today. They can be integrated in our redevelopment strategies today, while we move forward with the really concrete capital investments that are needed. So it's a combination of, specific projects, long-term strategy, and public and private working together on the implementation so that they marry in the middle.
Exactly. And you led right into talking about relationships, which is what I wanted to get to, because it's very much an important piece that you can't do this alone. The private sector can't do this alone. The public sector can't do this alone. It has to be a shared teamwork of collaboration. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that is what, is leading to all of this really being part of everybody has a piece and a stake in it. Because we all have a stake in this, and because this is our community and this is where we live. So it's taking care of our environment at the same time having the economic ability to still live here.
It's funny when we put together the plan, and I don't want to shock anyone, but it was basically looking through the year 2070 and estimating $28 billion in total, but also recognizing, look, 1/3 of this is probably public. 2/3 of this probably comes through redevelopment strategies that would be happening anyway. It's just the way that we inform how that, what that takes place and what we require, which we've done historically. It's represented in standards that we have today. But Bob Swindell, who leads our major economic development entity, the Broward Alliance, or the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, stated he doesn't view this as a $28 billion project, but a $28 billion opportunity. Yeah. And you have to think about, how do all of us rely upon what happens next? It is going to affect cost of housing. I mean, we want resilient housing. We want, housing that's not going to be subject to escalating flood insurance costs. And our economic development partners have said that they view resilience the way that they've seen every shared economic development investment in the past, whether it was our beaches, our port, our airport, that it requires coming together with the business community on the larger scale solutions that are going to be core to how our community evolves and basically positions, because we have to have a resilient economy. We need resilient housing, and we need new opportunities that grow and evolve with the technologies that are happening, as part of this process.
Yeah, you said it. It's like brilliant. See, I'm like brilliant of how you put this all together, because it's a lot of information that that's one of the reasons why I think the resources that are out there is very useful. But I love that you kind of talked about the technology, because that's, I think, where we also have been having lots of conversations and working together. And Bob Swindell, who's, the biggest supporter of Marine Research Hub, the Alliance, is one of our founding members. But I also want to touch on the fact that, Broward County came to the table and has supported us in what we're doing. So as a partner, as a sponsor, you have been a huge part of that. Senator Geller, who's commissioner with Broward County, has been, at the forefront of saying we have to support the innovation and the technology. Because yes, it's a lot of solutions, but we do need to embrace some of this opportunity for more innovative solutions around climate, around the blue economy. So let's talk about that for a little bit, about how do you see the county? I mean, I know you support us. You're a big supporter of the Marine Research Hub financially, with resources, with just relationships. But how do you see the county being able to help really elevate some of this new technology?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're a great partner. So
I think,
So, and it is so important to have that infrastructure. I mean, because you can have the interest, but unless you have the resources, things don't get done.
Yep.
And so you're a big part of helping to make that move to the reality of investments that supporting growth of technologies and startups and so forth, and industries that will be part of our long-term solutions. But I would say that we've made economic resilience a core part of the overall resilient strategy in Broward County.
Yeah.
And it's been a fundamental part of how we talk about resilience, is economic resilience. And so We had, one of the regional summits that we hosted was the Business of Resilience. We're getting ready to host in this year now, the 18th annual summit in November, and it's capitalizing on climate and bringing forward innovative solutions. One of the things I've really enjoyed about our approach is that we've integrated 4 years ago and will also this year pitch sessions as part of our hosting responsibilities. And so this is about finding ways to provide a platform that exposes our startups that are maybe local or those that are interested in setting up in the region and hopefully in Broward County, giving them an expansive platform of the whole summit audience, which is quite diverse. It's business leadership, it's investors, it's consultants, it's academics, it's our elected leadership, our management community, to say this is what's happening in this realm, allow them to present their ideas, have exhibits within the summit space, and hopefully be able to cultivate that long-term acknowledgement that we are interested, as some in our community say, of being the epicenter of resilience. There's going to be a lot of money spent here. We don't want the ho-hum solutions. We want those that are the green solutions that are delivering co-benefits. Maybe it's carbon sequestration. Maybe it's, low carbon concrete. Maybe it's bioforms in the way that we build seawalls. We want to move from the traditional to the innovative. And we also want young people who are growing up in this area to be excited about the opportunities that come, but fundamentally thinking about how can every dollar that we're spending be one that's got a green component, innovative piece, and be part of the resilient solution.
Yeah, we talk a lot. I mean, a lot of people in the business community, especially in startup space, are talking about like dual use. Well, here is, it really is the opportunity for dual use. And we know we can't just flip a switch and go, all green. We have to start building in ways to incorporate the green into what we're already doing. And I think that's where, bringing some of these solutions, our opportunity for the stage to the forefront is really important. And the solutions that we need right now, the infrastructure, like you said, the stormwater management solutions, the coastal resilience and protecting, both of our Everglades and our ocean side. So this year, 2026, November, I think it's November 4th through the 6th, is the Climate Compact with our capitalizing on climate. So let's talk a little bit about some of the solutions that you're hoping maybe will come out of this. What is Broward County and even the municipalities? What are some of the things that you guys are looking for some new innovation?
Yeah. Well, first, without being an expert in this area, I do want to share that I think what's happening with alternative fuels and technologies for powering the marine environment is really significant. We had the benefit of participating in COP30 and the local leaders forum leading into that down in Brazil this last year. And one of the things that I heard there, which I was not aware of, was that if you take the marine industry as a whole across the globe, it would be the, 8th largest relative to all the countries in terms of total emissions. And that's not to brand the industry, but to say that is an amazing opportunity. And we know that there is so much that's happening at our own port. They've moved away from, into electric and a lot of
the shore power that they're implementing in Miami here in Port Everglades.
And on ground equipment, cranes and so forth. And so that's significant. And I've seen, hybrid ferries. And so there's all kinds of excitement, I think, to come in terms of alternative fuels and technology to power that industry. Coral reefs.
Yeah.
So that is our passion, our lifeblood, really. When so much of that brings people to South Florida is
our beaches and our coral reef.
Yeah. And they're also very stressed.
Yep.
And so when we think about, and there are startups that are involved in looking at hardy genetics, and how can we partner with entities that are maybe positioned to provide land-based nurseries, artificial reefs that might serve to provide substrate for placement and really build up and aid the marine ecosystem as these stresses are occurring so that we can help the evolution of the hardy genetics and really see that advance and be, stewards in the best way that we can for the changes that are already taking place. We know that there are more investments taking place in terms of barriers to storm surge, alternative strategies. And so looking at what are some of the modified designs that can be effective in certain parts of our shore environment to perhaps lessen the impacts of surge that occur with rising seas, while we're also, again, enhancing and diversifying substrate for natural and nursery-based recruitments. I think what's happening in terms, I've already mentioned the seawall strategies.
Yeah.
I mean, in Broward County, look, we don't want the solution to be seawalls, but we have nearly 300 miles of seawalls as it exists. So these will be built up with time. How can we improve, beautify, soften the transition, all the living shoreline strategies? I mean, we're very excited about that. And we're already seeing so much promise taking place that in, 3D printing is part of that.
Yep. But Kind Design has done some. They're based in Miami, has done some already, put in some new seawalls in Fort Lauderdale area. Yeah. And hopefully that will just continue to scale up as more people are aware of these solutions. Yeah. What do we think about as we talk about some of the opportunities? So these are some of the solutions that you guys are kind of keeping your eye out for. What about how can new startups, and when we've talked about, having the climate compact and, this platform for innovative solutions, but how are some other ways that maybe, we're looking at pilot opportunities or innovation lab space and some of those? How does the county see themselves as being a supporter of some of that space that's growing?
Yeah, I will acknowledge that is a very strong interest. And of course, we're very interested in working with the Marine Resource Hub and making some progress.
Yes. Yeah. We're working on it. We have lots to talk, but the county has been a big supporter and trying to do that. We're pilots and stuff. Where do you see, I know you guys are interested in it, but how do you see it fitting into this piece for the audience to learn a little more?
Okay. Well, I think everybody would like to see local governments do more. We would like to do more. We would like to be able to be those partners. So it's useful for entities to communicate, connect with local governments, connect with the Marine Hub, connect with some of our academic partners. There are a lot of voices, our Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. There are a lot of active partners that can help forge those relationships and find whether there's a private entity, a government property, a new project that's coming forward. Sometimes permitting can be challenging. And so we welcome the conversation to learn more about what's proposed, to help identify how we can address some of the regulatory concerns or issues that might exist. We need to be aware of what those evolutions are, what others perceive or realize those challenges to be, and figure out how can we navigate those things. So come in early with the conversations, the pitch sessions that we'll be running this year. We're going to have a collegiate pitch session, a more kind of mature, more of a mature innovator pitch session. And I think that they can expect to see some of those announcements also on the Marine Hub website.
We're working together very closely on that. And I'm super excited because I love the fact that this is such a huge collaboration. I mean, you said this before with the climate compact, with the Resilient Broward plan, with what we're doing now, and just kind of helping support the innovation. I mean, it is all about the relationships that we have. And like you said, the more you can get involved and see what are our needs, I think there are so many great solutions out there. And I want to kind of, touch on this for a second but it may not, there's tons of innovation. There's tons of solutions. Some are really crazy out there, amazing stuff. Some are very simple and basic, just implementing new solutions. But I think one of the things that's really important for people who are in the startup space is the needs of the community. Like you might have this great idea and it's number 10 on the list of the county or the municipalities. But for them to now also be building those relationships and understand these are our priorities right now, then that will hopefully maybe bring some of these new solutions to the forefront for some of these companies. And then we're going to be able to get down, once we deal with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, then we're going to get down to be able to start working on some of those other needed impacts in our community. So because of that, I think, I'm excited for us and what we're working on with the innovation. I want to go back. You were talking about COP, because I think that is unique. Not very many counties or cities tend to attend COP, is my understanding, maybe, or maybe it's evolving. I know you're part of the Resilient Cities, but I want to talk a little about how the county got involved in COP, because it's an international conference.
Yeah. I think that it's important to note that strides were made back in, I want to say 2012, but anyway, with the hosting in Paris. And that was the first time that there had been an active move to bring local voices, as they call them actors, but, key stakeholders. I think that the realization is that 80%, if you look at emissions, originate in, cities, and solutions. It's local communities that are also dealing with the impacts, and local governments are far more swift, nimble, agile than higher levels of government. Local governments tend to be able to advance goals and strategies and tools and solutions in exceeding the rate of what happens at the federal level. And so there's just a reality that local governments are going to, and 80% of the population will live in cities.
Yeah.
By the year, I think the estimate's 2030.
And then most it's coastal as well. So we're in kind of the perfect spot for.
I think over 50% of the U.S. population and GDP is in coastal counties. So the effort was first made there. I have to acknowledge Bloomberg Philanthropies has been pivotal to bringing local governments from across the globe, not just I think providing support outside of the U.S. as well, but to these local forums that happened in UAE with COP28 and now here with COP30. The U.S. mayors has been significant. ICLEI, those are all entities who've really worked together to acknowledge local governments can make progress when sometimes there's sluggish activity elsewhere. They are key stakeholders. We can't afford to wait. And it is where innovation can take place most quickly. And so I think that will be a trend that continues, and it is exciting and it's a privilege. And the exposure that we receive, and, I'll acknowledge at COP28, the type of innovation that I was exposed to at that convening, I brought immediately back to Broward County and said, this is what's happening elsewhere. We need to be doing more at home.
And I think that's huge. That is such an important piece of being able to attend these events where you do get to learn from other cities and municipalities and what they're doing, because we're all feeling the same impacts, no matter where you are globally, dealing with sea level rise, dealing with stormwater, storm intensification. We even talk about heat more now than we talked about before. And I think people don't realize that the resources that you are exposed to and that you can bring back as you start planning for our community, but then also what you can share with others, because that's what we want to be, is we want to be the epicenter for solutions. We want to be, we're at ground zero for everything that's happening. And so if we can be the ones who are piloting and deploying and innovating and building, a home for solutions for our community that we need, but that have a global impact, that's a huge advantage. And we don't have to go out and now try to build that. We already have that because of what you have done. You, along with the support of the county and the commissioners. And I just think it's amazing. It's the movements that have been made over these past couple of years. I think some people sometimes feel like it's not fast enough.
Yeah.
But it's also like faster than what it was before.
Right.
And I know for you, I think can be frustrating sometimes, because we see these things happening and we want to move faster. But at the same time, you have so many pieces that you have to juggle in order to be like, it's science, it's technology, it's policy, it's all working together with all of these entities. And so as we kind of start to wrap up, I want you to kind of reflect on, your role and how it's evolved over time, because you come from a very strong science background, but now talk more policy, science, everything together. How do you balance all of that and the role that you've taken on now and can being kind of this conveyor of, you share all of this information and you have to have all of it in your brain. How do you do that?
Well, could always do it better. Yeah, sometimes we all need to try to sound a little more articulate, but I just think it's an exciting time. And I believe every year, I think, is the next great opportunity. And so I'm just more and more excited. Yes, sometimes it can be challenging, but as they say, you look back to see how far you've come.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have done great things as a region. I think that the opportunities that exist today, I mean, we look at the rate at which technology rolls out, and I think there's so much promise in front of us. I think I do have the benefit of a science background, but I know the importance of policy. I was really educated about that early on. And now there's all the other things that I rely upon really great, partners who are talented in economics and, areas of industry and practice. And so we all bring something to the table. We all benefit from the expertise of others, constantly learning, growing, strong partnerships. I think one things I did want to acknowledge is that we are desperate to bring large capital to the types of long-term opportunities that we know exist here. And we look forward to seeing that happen, I think, over in the next, couple of years. We're really hoping to serve as that hub that you've been able to get started for us.
Well, I definitely am excited. I think that is an important excitement. Every year, we're starting 2026 and, this excitement, I think the capitalizing on climate is just so unique. It's always been since we've really started working together, the business community and bringing everyone to the table has been such a strong passion of yours. And I think that comes from the fact that you've always worked, building relationships. And that's what, our goal is to make those connections as well. And so how do you see, that's been a huge evolution and change in bringing more people to this conversation. What are you excited the most about this year with the business community and growing those additional relationships in 2026?
Well, we've been planning this forthcoming summit for some time, and we have appreciated that this is an opportunity to really sit down and talk seriously about what it takes to build the network of on-the-ground partners to serve as that incubator, that permanent, recognizable entity incubator that serves as a focal point for where you go when you're really ready to get it done. And we're hoping that with this year's summit, and we've got some strong partners coming in from areas who've done this well. And we've been studying for some time that part of our, go out and figure out where are some of those best models. I really want to think that this is the year where we really build out that framework to create that prominent presence that when you come into Broward County and South Florida and you're looking to really engage in a meaningful way in growing your innovative practice and supporting resilient solutions, this is where you're going to want to be. And we hope that this is the year where we can really start to put the bolts together in order to move forward formally with that. So it'll be a stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned. I'm excited because it is all about the relationships. I've talked about it a lot about, we have the support and connectivity with the government entities, not only the county, but many of the municipalities that are here, South Florida, not only in Broward, but Palm Beach and Miami, but it's also our university partners. We've got a lot of great, talented people in this space. It's just about, like you said, kind of creating that hub and that space where people can come if they are here locally, but also bringing in solutions from across the world.
And exposing young people, having a place where young people can come in, they can see what this looks like. They can see the opportunity for themselves. And as we know, no matter what your interest is, there's a place for your your skills, your capabilities in this field. And so helping them to see how they can be part of these solutions and that there are good prospects, good jobs that are going to be with us for a very long time and really work to help grow the skill set and the opportunity for young people who are interested in being part of the practice.
Well, it's all about, like we've said, it's the solutions that are going to create economic viability and strength in our communities. That's jobs, that's skills, that's our, livelihood here, but it's also taking care of our resources in our community and our environment. And it's the blue economy, ocean economy, what is all about that. And I'm really excited that, it's all connected. And like you said, there's the jobs that are all connected to it. You don't have to be a science person necessarily to be working in the blue economy, the climate space, the resilient space. We need all skill sets. And you said, that goes back to the modeling from the economics. It goes back to, all the data analysis. And I think there's some really great opportunities in that space that this relationship and how we all work together is showcasing that really at a large stage for a lot of other people. And so I'm super excited as well for this year. And so as we wrap up, I want to remind everybody where they can find more information about Resilient Broward County's Resilience Plan, Climate Compact. We also have we have so many things happening right now. We have a Resilient Broward Summit, our second annual, coming up here at the end of February. So where can they find out more information of Broward County stuff, resilience?
So the main county website is broward.org/resilience.
There you go.
And for the resilience plan, they can go to resilientbroward.com. If anyone is interested in more information on the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact, that is easily Googleable.
That's the word. It's good. Yeah, you can find it. We'll put some links in some of the different areas in the bottom of our channels and stuff like that. And you can also come to the Marine Research Hub, and we'll be sharing out more information, especially as we build out this platform for the innovation pitch competitions that we've got going on. It's all new. It's all exciting. 2026 I'm really excited for what we've got to come. And I'm so glad. Thank you for sitting down with me. I'm like, she's just a wealth of knowledge. We barely touch the surface of all the things that are going on. You've got all these studies that have to be done. The CNF, I always mess up the CNF.
CNSF is there you go in Southern Florida.
I just don't know how you keep it all in your brain all the time, or day. Thank you so much for sitting down. And maybe, next time we sit down, we'll be at the Climate Compact or following up on some of the innovation and sharing out, some of the solutions that we're implementing. And it's what you said, stay tuned, for our next conversation. So thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. If you want to follow along, please, like and subscribe, follow us, join us for our next episode of the Blue Economy podcast. We might even be having Bob Swindell and Phil Purcell sitting down in the next couple of months to share how the Marine Research Hub started. And a lot of it is thanks in part to the support of the county and you personally, as well as just as a whole. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Been wonderful.
And we'll see you guys again next time on the next episode of the Blue Economy podcast. Have a great day.
If your brand belongs in the heart of the yachting world, this is where it happens. Yachting International Radio reaches over 1 million yachting professionals and enthusiasts every month, with 77 million impressions, 220,000 social followers, and 74,000 podcast subscribers. Our hosts are insiders, crew, captains, CEOs, trusted voices shaping the industry. This is targeted, high-impact advertising in a luxury niche. Visit yachtinginternationalradio.com/advertise. Your audience is already listening.